with me. And as we wander down the crowded street, even if we're shuffling our feet, you make me never wanna miss a beat. We're meant to be. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. Hold my hand, fall in love with footprints in the sand, and kiss each other while we watch the band. And everyone who knows us understands we're meant to be. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. So walk with me as we wander down the crowded street, even if we're shuffling our feet. You make me never wanna miss a beat, never miss a beat. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, nowhere else I wanna go. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, nowhere else I wanna go. So walk with me, walk with me.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Cedar Falls Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, May 4th. I will call this meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz,
Here.
Lotta,
Here.
Nagel,
Here.
Hallbaker,
Here.
Fairbanks,
Here.
Chrisman,
Here.
Dunn,
Here.
all here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that takes us to item number 1, Blackhawk County Solid Waste Management Commission Operations Project and Program Update. And Brian Heath's going to give us the quick overview. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm here on behalf of the Blackhawk County Solid Waste Management Commission, and also to introduce our Solid Waste and Resource Recovery Administrator, John Foster. He's going to be going through some new and quite a few changes that are going to be taking place at the landfill. As you know, the commission is made up of representatives from the City of Cedar Falls, City of Waterloo, Blackhawk County, and small communities. So I'm representative for Cedar Falls. There are 2 for Waterloo. We have 1 for the small communities and 1 elected official from Blackhawk County. We've got a lot of positive changes coming up here. John Foster is going to go over not only that, but he's also going to detail what took place over the weekend with our collection event. So I'll introduce John Foster and let him take it from here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The first thing we can talk about is Brian did a really good job at introducing the commission a little bit. Our mission statement is here if you'd like to read that. A lot of it has to deal with just solid waste management within Blackhawk County is our intent of what we started off with. The commission was started in 1974 in response to the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. All the communities within the county realized that they needed to get together to be able to meet the new rules. And as Brian had mentioned, that we have an intergovernmental entity that you are part of that was established during that time with members throughout the county. From when we first started off, we looked at a variety of solid waste management, from incineration all the way up to landfill, and finally we settled up onto a landfill. The commission's role, for the most part, was mainly a utility board. We would oversee the landfill. Originally it was all privately contracted. The commission contracted with a private organization to own and operate the facility. The commission directed all of our waste to that facility so that way they could meet our legal requirements. The commission worked on developing other programs for landfill diversion and to continue with the education on the avoidance of waste into the landfill. Over time, when 1984 came around, there was a change in regulations which changed a lot of the waste that was going to the landfill. It was actually classified as hazardous waste. And at that point, a lot of the residents around didn't want to have a hazardous waste landfill within Blackhawk County, and so they had a referendum that basically directed the commission to purchase the landfill. Kind of up in the air whether we were supposed to operate it too at the same time, but that was the choice that the commission ended up making, was to own and invest into the landfill itself, but then we had contracted out our operations for that facility. That has been under that same model since 1984. We've had 2 contractors during that time. The contract comes up every 5 years, and that's the discussion point where the commission has to continue that operation and not. Over the last 7 years, one of the things I could say that when I came to the commission, what I like to do specifically during my job interview is that when I looked at a lot of the practices that are going on within Blackhawk County, there's some communities, specifically Cedar Falls, that do have more progressive views towards solid waste management and environmental issues, but it's really not getting carried out as a mission throughout the commission itself. And so as I kind of looked through, there's a lot of tools in our toolbox that the commission didn't know at that time. So a lot of it was just kind of educating and making sure these are things that we can and powers that we have as a commission to move forward to be able to kind of unite more of economies of scale when you start looking at solid waste management, and we're not necessarily focused on final disposal, which is really where the landfill was at. A lot of that time over the last 7 years, we spent a lot of questions just to ask, what is a commission? What do you want it to be? How really can it sit there and support our member communities in doing what they needed to do? And a lot of that came back down the conversation is that the commission does need to have a stronger role within the solid waste management system, be a leader within the community, and be able to kind of help direct those programs as we're moving forward. So with that, the commission ended up electing to take over the operations of the landfill beginning July 1st, 2026, which is coming right up. We provided notice. We have elected not to go back out for bid for contracted services. A lot of this is looking at the improved quality of services, moving the landfill from being a final disposal facility into more of a resource recovery park. So we can start looking at how do we expand the services that we're providing to be more landfill diversion than necessarily just focused on final disposal. One of those projects that we had already underway is our landfill gas to energy program, which is kind of extending more from being a final disposal into an energy park. And as we kind of start developing a lot of these, we can start exploring more on how we can actually do that. We're also looking at the control of our activities as well as our expenses at the site. As we go out for a contract, we are looking at a 5 to 15% increase every cycle. A lot of those costs we don't control, so this gives us a little bit more ability to be able to control those costs and the level of customer service that we want to provide. As I mentioned, right now we are underway. We've purchased all the equipment and we're in the process of hiring staff. We're probably about 75% with our staffing. We're still looking for scale house operators, equipment operators, and operation and maintenance technicians. underway. Once we focus on the next 12 months, we're going to focus a lot more on just our core service of landfilling, and then you should start seeing a lot more programming coming out of the facility. The one that we're going to talk about specifically is going to be electronics recycling, similar to what the commission is doing as well.
Kelly, it's your favorite thing.
I love it.
Some of the programs that we have a semi-annual household hazardous waste, which Councilwoman Dunn has been a very big supporter for that. It was held last weekend at the Waterloo wastewater treatment plant. We received over 700 some vehicles, 700 some households were considered each one of those. We ended up loading out 42 pallets of electronic waste. It seems rather consistent on this 5-hour event. We also had a roughly 62 drums of household hazardous waste collected during that event. One of the messages that we try to provide is that electronics is available year-round through the Cedar Falls Transfer Station as well as through Goodwill. That's one of those focus materials. We want to kind of try to move away from the household hazardous waste event because a lot of the materials that we take during the household hazardous waste event are not able to get disposed of throughout the year. That's the only 2 days. So we want to try to focus on those materials during that event, which gets us into farther down in probably about the next 18 months or so. We're looking at trying to transition into a larger program to where it's more permanent instead of necessarily the 2 collection events over the year. There's a lot of challenges that are going to be associated with that one coming down the pipeline. Next one is our educational outreach. Our mission right now is to teach residents on the importance of resource recovery as well as landfill diversion. We have a partnership with Blackhawk County Public Health Department as well as University of Northern Iowa through the Green Iowa AmeriCorps program. So we do have members that are going out in the community providing education to our community as well as volunteer assistance for when we're doing community litter cleanups. We typically do about 1,000 contacts per year for students throughout our 175 programs. And then, of course, part of our outreach is sitting and presenting to community outreach groups on what the commission is and on the services that we provide.
And John, did you want to advance your slides on the screen?
And I've kind of already opened the can about shifting to resource management. It's just another way to look at solid waste management. Instead of looking at final disposal, we go back up to what the hierarchy is. First thing that we need to look at is how do we reduce the amount of waste that's coming to, how much waste we're generating. Then we look at how do we reduce the toxicity of the material. Then we get into programs like reuse programs, fix-it clinics. So Habitat Restore is another one of those good examples. Goodwill is a good example of those. People don't think about those organizations as tools within a solid waste management system, but they're very valuable tools. Then we start getting back into the next steps where we're talking about recycling of the materials, turning it back into its raw resource, and energy recovery. And then final, the disposal where we lose all that investment going through the entire thing. One of the things we're going to start looking at, one of the challenges that we do have is the resource recovery within Blackhawk County. We have 4 different processors of just kind of typical curbside recycling. Each one of those processors have their own acceptance criteria, and then each community and each hauler contracts separately with those processors. So it's very difficult to be able to have a unified message on what's really kind of recyclable within the area. So that is something that we're trying to work with our member communities as well as with the larger planning area to kind of bring that more unified so that we can have a little easier method and to make it a little bit more understandable to the general community on what we're trying to do. We're also looking at focusing on exploring organic waste management. We do have the landfill gas to energy project out at the facility. We're harvesting the methane gas off the landfill, and we're cleaning it up, and then we're selling that as a transportation fuel. We have a very cool project. We're doing about, before I go down that far, we're looking at expanding that off into food waste as well as into other type of organic waste, looking into the possibility of using anaerobic digestion so that we can take that methane gas that's off of that or some other syngas and turn that into another profit center. We're looking into, unfortunately, we didn't get the community solar bill passed in the legislature this year. We have a project looking at putting a 5 megawatt community solar project onto the hazardous waste cell at our facility and then utilizing that as another energy source for the community. So there's some opportunities that we're looking at to utilize our landfill for other things besides just landfilling. And I kind of jumped to the landfill gas project. We ended up having first year, this is our second year into this project. The first year we were transporting all of our gas to Madison, Wisconsin through a virtual pipeline while we were trying to get our interconnect agreement with Northern Natural Gas. We had that, our interconnect was actually established back in October, and we're still going through the shakedown process to make sure that everything is all right for that project, but we are on the gas and we are selling that gas onto the grid. Basically, just through the landfill gas collection system, we're destroying about 6,670 tons of CH4 methane per year. With us actually taking that's just the destroying it, so that way it's not going out into the atmosphere. What we're actually doing by offsetting transportation fuel, now we've increased that to about 16,000 tons per year through our avoided as well as what's destroyed. I know it's a big number to kind of look at, but when you look at what it really means to most people, that's the emissions that we're looking at for 20 million gallons of gasoline that's now avoided. So it's a pretty good project that we're looking at, and again, if we can expand that out, we're looking to expand that project. One of the things that I like to kind of plant a little seed with this council is that, especially with our energy issues that we're running into right now with diesel fuel increasing significantly, the gas is available for local use if you're willing to make the investment into converting your fleets over to renewable natural gas. It's a stable source of energy. It's local. It has a great story if you're looking at your climate or your carbon imprint or your
Footprint.
I just drew a blank. That was the commission and some of our initiatives in a really quick rundown. What all questions would you have or comments?
Yeah. Open to council.
Thank you very much, John. That was very informative. Could you explain what you are using as a virtual pipeline to Madison? What's virtual?
Virtual is a way to call it it's a truck. It's a compressed gas truck. And
Okay.
so as we're pulling the gas off the collection system, it's getting compressed, put into a semi truck, and then they're transporting that over to Madison, Wisconsin, where they had their interconnect.
Okay, thank you.
It's a fancy.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Thank you so much, John. Still referencing our awesome tour that you gave us and all the cool things that we learned while we were doing that. So you had mentioned when we were on our tour that there might be some opportunity for an education space. Is that still kind of on the radar of the commission and a long-term goal?
That is very much on our space right now. The one thing that the commission has done a marvelous job at is position ourselves with land. The parcel that we own to the west of the landfill is it's a nice buffer area, and unfortunately it wasn't useful as land because of the natural gas pipeline. But now that was actually turned into a benefit for us, and that's kind of the location where I'm looking at building some of these alternative, the education center as well as any other support facilities that we can have at that time.
I think that's really cool and a great opportunity for our community, so thank you.
Good point is if anybody's interested in doing a tour of the landfill, I'm more than happy to schedule that for our members as well as for the general public.
Who else has some?
I just want to put a little plug in that I use a lot because I don't always remember where things go. Your website has a very helpful tool that if I can't remember how to dispose of something, I simply type it in on the search bar, and it tells me every time exactly how I need to dispose of that. So I think if people aren't aware of that, it is on your website, and it's in my life, it's very helpful. So just a plug for that too.
Thank you very much. Yeah, our FAQs on the website need to be updated, and that's going to be something that you're going to see probably within the next 8 months, as well as a new website. It definitely needs to get refreshed. and that's a great tool, and unfortunately, it's a tool that's buried within the website.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, questions? No, otherwise, I'll just say thank you for all the work you're doing, especially the conversations we're having these days. This is something I think top of mind for a lot of people, and having previously worked in the energy industry, I know it's a big thing to figure out how can we reuse a lot of what we have and not always depend on new fuels and generations. So appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, and that takes us to item number 2, Developer Task Force Report. And we've got Community Development Director Stephanie Sheets. Quick preface, everyone's aware of the project. We're finally here. We only rescheduled it 2 times, 3 times.
2 times.
But we're here today. And so this is the report from probably a year's worth of work, working with the community, the task force, getting the feedback, a lot of the input sessions. Thank you, a few of the council members for chairing and leading that group. And so This, we will be, I think, at the end of it, just asking for recommendation for receiving and finally adopting the plan.
Receiving and filing.
Yep, which will be at a next council meeting, so just looking for that recommendation based on conversation today.
Great.
All yours, Stephanie.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, well, again, thank you to everyone that participated in this process and is listening tonight, and a couple members that are attending in the audience, as well as the council members that helped lead through this process. Just going to give about 20-minute overview that I gave also as a report out to the task force, just as we kind of move through the process of making this information known to everyone and possibly moving forward with receiving and filing the report. So the background is that the mayor established this in July. It feels like so long ago. Not quite a year, but getting there. And it was established with 3 voting members, council members, and then there were a variety of other members invited to the conversation that we really wanted to hear from. And I think Councilmember Krisman, who chaired, really had to pull some of that out during some of the meetings. As our other council members also know, sometimes they got to chair, so that was exciting. But we wanted to invite people that had been doing development or applying for building permits, generally in the most recent kind of 2-year period. So we went through our records, and anybody that we had on file as an applicant for a subdivision or a site plan, or an applicant for a building permit from January of 2023 to July of 2026, they were invited to participate. And from there, if I did not receive a notice from them that they wanted to participate, they didn't regularly receive notices of the meetings. It was people who expressed interest that I then communicated going forward, and that was an add-on. You know, some people kind of came in after 2 or 3 meetings, or but if they dropped off, they just stayed on the list as getting that communication. We also invited the chair of our Cedar Falls Housing Commission, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We had a CFU representative there as well, since there's a lot of subdivisions that have infrastructure related to CFU, and they have standards, so we wanted to hear if there was something there. We wanted them to be part of that. And then a representative from the Cedar Valley Home Builders Association. We had 5 different topics that we covered in 5 different meetings, and then we had a report discussion when the draft was ready, and then in March the task force had a final meeting to make a recommendation about it. Here's my wonderful use of AI to get some variety into the report, and so the topics were rezoning, preliminary plat, construction plans and SWIP, site plans, and then building permits and final inspections. For the meetings, we approached it as first staff would give about a 25-minute presentation just to talk about the application process, what the review process is like, just give that kind of as an introduction of kind of what happens when something comes forward for rezoning or preliminary plat and so on. And then wanted to leave a majority of the time for discussion. And that discussion included questions that were asked and answered, data that was requested sometimes, and then bigger topics that maybe are going to take a little bit more thought, and so those are documented in the report. Following each of the meetings, there were always meeting minutes, but also following them, I put together usually a 1 or a 2-page meeting theme type of summary and provided that at the following meeting to the task force and expressed to them that the intent was to use that information in compiling the final report. So nothing was going to be a surprise, and nor did we want it to be at the very end, all of a sudden things are happening and wait, where did that come from? So hopefully, I think that we offered, we always had some follow-ups at the next meeting about things, and so people should be aware of most of the topics that are in the report at this point. And all of the information was available as we went through this process on a project website where people could access the presentation. After we had the meeting, we would post the presentation, we'd post the agenda in advance, we'd post the minutes, all of that information. So moving on. So then, in putting together the report, the task was to, how do we organize the themes? Once we've identified those themes or talked about what was coming out of the process and discussions, we looked at these 3 different buckets of policy, process, and regulation. And so pages 7 and 8 of the report group into these major buckets the various themes that we had. And then I am going to summarize some of the recommendations coming out of that. Before I do that, I will mention that in those latter parts of the report, it's a table format where the topic is brought up and then the task force discussion, if there was discussion on any of the topics, we tried to reflect that in a nutshell, what that was or what the question or comment was. We have staff's recommendation, and then I think there was a column for considerations, just kind of a pros and cons kind of look. And then finally, we have a placeholder for any council feedback that might happen today or in the next meeting. We want to reflect all the conversations that happened as we go through this process. So in the policy bucket, there were 10 themes kind of related to policy. That starts on page 9 of the report. And I tried to summarize then what did we do with these 10 themes? How do they play out? And there are 3 that we do not recommend any further action on. There are 3 that we consider kind of done, whether it was an asked and answered type of thing or really no further work about it or no changes are recommended. There are a couple in progress because we are making some changes to applications and things like that that will help with some of the questions or clarifying with some checklists, so that's kind of the in progress type of thing. Tonight we'll talk about 2 items where we're asking for council feedback about how we're proposing to address those. And then there will be times where the topic is really most appropriate to consider in a rewrite because it's a bigger overarching issue that's going to touch a lot of different areas. So that's a little bit of the organization. Each of these 3 buckets, I kind of did a table like this of kind of where do we fall in the overall total. So I'm going to start first by the 2 items that we're asking for council concurrence on, which will be on our last slide as well, reminding you. But it's about a theme to what we're calling decouple this landscaping plan and the photometric plan from a full submittal for site plan review. And when we say full submittal, it means that initial submittal. We had a lot of conversation around how can we kind of manage costs was the developers, how can we kind of incrementally move through things. Some of it comes down to choices that are being made by the developer, and maybe some of it is just not knowing some things that could be broken down differently. But this one then is split into what we consider our administrative review districts versus what I'm calling the specialty zones. So administrative review, as the council knows, you're not regularly seeing site plans for developments in the C1 or the C2 district, for example, or even the M1. So those are kind of our administrative review districts. And so for that, staff can simply implement through the application process. We'll just say, if you want to turn in the detail later, you can. And what we mean by later and detail is in your initial submittal, there's already standards about you have to have X percentage of open space and it has to be 5 feet wide or whatever. So show that on the plan. There's also already a standard about the number of landscaping points that you have to accumulate and have as a part of your proposal. So they'll show that on their initial submittal. But the detail about what type of plant, exactly where it's going to go, or the type of vegetation, that can come later if somebody wants to do that, because the feedback is that it might be designed one way and then the installer and the landscape architect doing it might have a different idea of what's going to work better. So we'll leave that, we're proposing that we can decouple that. Similarly, we think that same type of approach could happen on the ones that do need to be reviewed by our Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. We think that we could still follow that same approach on an individual basis if they would like to propose just basic information, and that's in our staff report write-up that they're meeting those basic requirements with a condition of approval on that site plan, for example, that staff can then administratively review the detail about, is it a juniper bush or some other type of rose bush or whatever. Now, all that said, it shifts the timing of some of the work, which is not a concern for us, but sometimes there's a big rush to get that building permit. And if that information isn't in with the building permit, it will hold up the building permit. And so our timeframes about building permits being a fairly quick turnaround could be impacted by a choice that's made. Moving on to the items not recommended, there was some discussion about pre-zoning land to create development-ready property. This is not a new theme. This actually was discussed several years ago with the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation. We spent quite a bit of time developing a map about kind of green, yellow, red zones, which are easiest with infrastructure, that type of thing. Ultimately, because of some of the challenges and the challenges that I have listed on the slide, staff does recommend that evaluating proposals at the time of development is the best because you have the most current information about if you're leapfrogging over another property, where is the water or the sewer coming from, and it allows for informed decisions by our commission and our elected officials on that rezoning. So that would be why we would recommend not doing anything further on this one. But we do know that rezoning does take quite a bit of time. There can be a risk in that, as we've seen with some development proposals, and so that can always be something that's discussed. We also had the question about 3-year maintenance bonds and whether that's necessary. This was reviewed in 2016, pretty much internally, I will say, at that time, and the focus at that time was about the bond language itself and how some of the technicalities of that language were difficult to meet, and it was difficult to get bonds. We did spend some time thinking about that 3-year timeline and felt that that was still important to maintain. We knew of a project where in particular that we were having issues with, and felt it's best to give a conservative recommendation when it comes to infrastructure and public dollars. And so we explained to the group that the purpose of the time frame is to be able to observe that infrastructure through 2 freeze-thaw cycles. That is usually when we start to see workmanship type of issues come to light. And it does also account for the various times when a development might get done. You know, it might get done in the winter, and so we didn't really make it through a full freeze-thaw, for example. And so 3 years is the reason why that's in place. Also, there was the request about pre-framing inspection prior to the trades starting their rough-in work. And there are potential benefits to that, but there are also some drawbacks to that. The benefits allow a general contractor, for example, to know what kind of trade-related changes might have happened and be able to work with the responsible trade to correct those. It's a little bit more clearly assignable at that point. The drawback is by state code, rough-ins are to be done after insulation, rough-in inspections. And I'm sorry, I don't know all the technicalities of that. It's not totally my wheelhouse, so more questions can always be answered much better by our building official. But we had some code conflicts about that, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And also, we noted we do have complaints about the number of inspections that we have at this point, so we hesitate to recommend more to that minimum, but we are always willing to work with somebody that would like to do that. And so our building official has offered, happy at the beginning of a project, if a contractor wants to reach out and wants to do it that way for their own project, happy to do it that way. We'll talk about how that's going to run in advance so there are no surprises. We'll also talk about the added inspections and so the added fees for that. So we certainly can do it, we just don't recommend doing it across the board. Moving on to process, there were 18 themes in this bucket and 0 not recommended. So that's awesome. We've got a lot that we have worked on already and some that we have in progress, and then the council concurrence on the photometric plan and the landscaping plan that I already talked about. The process ones start on page 12 of the report, and we are working to get all of those addressed if they aren't already. We did have quite a few questions about SWIP. There was quite a discussion about this, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of an overview. This was an add-on from presenting to the task force, and it was asked by our council members that it might be good to go over this at this meeting. I will give the high level, but we've got the experts in the room that administer this every day who can answer any more technical questions or want to get into some details. So some of the themes that we had questions about, there were questions about what does active site mean? And hasn't been some clarity around that, so page 13 of the report talks about the different project types and what those mean. There was a request for clarity about what is the 70% cover for uniform vegetation, when is that met, how is it met, how's the decision made, lots of information that way, and so we cover that on page 14 with a little bit more information there. We had many express, hey, I'd really like to talk to the inspector. I'd really like to know when they're coming out. And so we said, yep, that's a really good idea. We have quarterly inspections that we're required to do, and we schedule those, so we can certainly reach out to the property owner or whoever the applicant is for SWIP and let them know that we'd like to coordinate an inspection. I will say, our intention is not to delay that inspection by a week or a month. If we don't hear back, we're going to need to proceed with that quarterly inspection. So that's on page 14. The corrections schedule had some discussion about it. There have been many questions and concerns about that. And so the report indicates that we kind of separated, engineering talked about it some more and separated what's considered urgent versus non-urgent. And so non-urgent type of items, if they're observed Monday through Wednesday, the expectation is to have those addressed by the end of day Friday. If they're observed Thursday through Friday, the expectation is to have them addressed by the end of the day Tuesday. This is at the latest. They can always be done sooner. Urgent items, if it's observed Monday through Thursday, they need to be done within 24 hours or by the end of the day Friday. The idea is to limit what's happening over the weekend when no one's there. And if it's observed on Friday, we ask that they address as much as possible to limit the exposure, like I just mentioned, but the deadline will be end of day Monday. We also had questions about, well, so when else do you come out and visit? What's going on? Why would you come out and visit? And so we explained how we are required to monitor when there might be something like a heavy rain, see if practices are in place, if they're working, or if the rain washed them away, or something like that. So that might prompt a visit to various sites. We'll try to make it around to everything, but there's a lot going on. We might have a complaint. And so we'll be out there more than just on the quarterly inspections. And so it was asked if we could indicate what prompted the visit, and so engineering's working on that. Certainly makes sense that we could indicate that. And then finally, there was discussion about how the standards may or may not be felt to be the same regardless of the project. Are we applying them similarly across the board for a private versus public project, a residential versus commercial? And while all these projects are a little bit different and will call for a different approach, there certainly are similarities, and so engineering is working on a checklist to help with that and an understanding of the uniformity there and consistency. In the regulation bucket, there were 6 themes there. Only one item to discuss that is not recommended. We feel that we've done 2 of those, and none in progress, none that need concurrence, but then the majority are more applicable to a rewrite of our zoning code or our subdivision code. That theme starts on page 17 of the report. The not recommended item was related to a question about whether there could be more options to allow, or more flexibility to allow rebuild, remodel, or expansion of existing homes on Cottage Row Road. When we met with the task force, we talked about how this area along Cottage Row, as the map shows you, is within the FEMA designated floodway. That is the most restrictive part of the floodplain. The Iowa DNR regulates this. We work very closely with them, so there was a little bit of frustration over hearing, well, the city might say Iowa DNR and Iowa DNR might say the city. It is because we work closely together. And the purpose of having the higher regulation here and stricter limitations about what can be done is that this area is reserved for safe passage of floodwaters. And the intent is to prevent increased flood risk by having obstructions and prevent risk to property as well. We did note then, there was a little bit of concern about how maybe we didn't fully take this comment into consideration, so that is noted in the report about the concern that was expressed at the meeting. And we thought, well, good point. It is an opportunity for us to mention and make note of the fact that our zoning code does state it's not just this area. Any non-conforming property in the city, whether it's related to a setback or whether it's related to the floodplain and elevation or whatever, or is lost due to fire, a non-conforming property is not guaranteed the right to rebuild or expand. So we're not treating this spot any differently. It's just that they really don't come up that often because that's not a fun thing to have to deal with, and thankfully not too many fires that happen in the community either, so it's just not a very frequent thing for us. And so we do actually have some flexibility in the floodplain through the Board of Adjustment. It is an added process, added time, notifications, but it provides the oversight if there is a really unique situation that should be considered. So that is how we handle those. And for our higher regulation, I'd be remiss if I did not note that our ratepayers for insurance receive a 25% discount on their flood insurance because of our high requirements that qualify us for the community rating system. So we're very proud of that, and we think that that manages costs for people pretty well. Just to note the topics that we will keep top of mind when we look at the zoning rewrite for what I call the specialty districts like RP, MU, any of the overlay, that type of thing are all specialty that require a Planning and Zoning Commission review as well as a council review. There was a request that for site plans that those only entail one Planning and Zoning Commission meeting instead of two. We actually already apply this on pretty straightforward cases, but it is always the commission's purview to decide if they think two meetings is needed or if just one meeting is needed. But we will try to put that forward on ones where we think one meeting should be sufficient. Certainly we have, with the downtown code and what's coming forward with College Hill, we'll be proposing with clearer standards, administrative review, so whether the planning and zoning role is really needed will be something that the council will weigh going forward. Reviewing the dimensional requirements of our standard zoning districts, or however we approach that with the new code. And what that means is we've had struggles from people about our setback requirements. 10% of the side yard, that's really odd. Why don't we just have a dimension? Why don't we say 5 feet or 10 feet? And why can't my front yard setback be less, or rear yard, or whatever? And there definitely have been, this has been an evolving area, a lot of different ways that communities handle it. So we'll be looking at that. Questions about different standards on the amount or the level of landscaping for larger sites, that when you're on a larger site, it starts to really add up to have so much landscaping. At the same time, it's a large site, and so the landscaping can blend in. So there's probably some pros and cons about that. And finally, concern about subjective terms in our current code, particularly in our specialty districts, that where we have terminology of similar to others or things like that, and a concern about that really not being clear, but also more importantly, how it might inhibit new ideas and types of construction. And so certainly we have an eye to that, and we've been changing that as we go with our codes in progress. So the task force made a recommendation on March 16th and recommended to follow the report as outlined, which means the items not recommended for action stay just that way, that we recognize what's completed or in progress, asking for concurrence on several of the policies or approaches that we've proposed there, and then knowing that there are items that will be considered or incorporated with our future zoning rewrite. So the next steps, I did not update this slide since I was delayed at the last one, so the dates are slightly different, just move them back a meeting. But we've made it through the task force discussion and recommendations. We've got the report updated based on those. We're here at the council committee talking about the report. I left a space here for any updates that we might need after tonight's discussion, and then we'd like to move forward with a future council business meeting receiving and filing the report. Tentatively, it would be our next meeting if the council agrees. And then just some agreement about whether the council feels that decoupling the detailed landscaping and photometric review would make sense, that we would then just tag that as a condition to site plan approval on projects that come through going forward if the applicant wishes to do it that way. With that, I will open it up to discussion.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. And with that, I'll open up to council. I don't know, Chair, if you want to say anything before kind of
Sure.
jump into everything.
I just want to thank staff. You guys have all done a really good job. I've learned a lot. I think everyone who's able to attend these meetings probably has. This is definitely not my wheelhouse. Stephanie's mentioned, code, these inspection things aren't her wheelhouse. This whole thing is not my wheelhouse. But again, I've learned a lot, and I had a fun time, and I think we had some really good discussion. And so I hope that we are able to take this kind of approach moving forward. I think it was really helpful for folks and maybe could be applied to other things as well. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Otherwise, open it up to, go ahead.
Stephanie, really appreciated the way the process ended up, the final results. I found it to be quite enjoyable, and that all people had an opportunity to express their concerns and try to come out with the best outcomes. None of it will ever be 100% what you want, but I did appreciate, and I know others did appreciate, having a voice and going through this. It kind of culminates a lot of things so that you actually we all had the opportunity to have a one-on-one with people and come up with best solutions. So it's a good process. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I do want to extend all of that to all the staff that helped with this as well. Chase Schrage, David Wicke, Karen Howard, JD, Chris Seavey, Michelle Peasley, Jamie Castle. I think I got everybody that prepared information or presented. Matt Dolan. Sorry, Matt.
See you, Matt.
Good job, Matt.
Just blends in.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Stephanie, I just echo the sentiments that have already been expressed. Staff did a great job with this. You guys did an awesome job of taking some feedback and even implementing some pretty quick changes based on feedback. And I don't know if you highlighted any of those. If you'd like to, it'd be great.
Oh, yeah. You put me on the spot. But
Yeah.
one in particular that we did right away was at the very first meeting, I'd just love to be able to easily get in touch with staff. I want just 20 minutes informally. And so we implemented a bookings app where every other Wednesday, we offer a 20-minute slot. So 3 slots are available that people can sign up for and just informally ask whatever questions they have. It started off very, very slowly, and I would say we've had a little bit of an uptick. But that said, it does help minimize having to schedule me asking Dave, when are you available, or Matt and Jamie. And sometimes when people sign up, they maybe click more people. We have all 3 divisions, inspections, planning, and engineering, and they might select all of those, but they really just have a building question, so we kind of work through those. But that was one that we did very quickly, and it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, I would just say overall, I think there was some good conversation. I think there's some learnings from all parties involved. None of us that were voting members for this are developers, so it was enlightening for me to hear some of the challenges, opportunities, and success stories that they've had with working with us. And then likewise, I think some good education back to that same group on, hey, some of this is within our purview and some of it isn't. And so just kind of having an understanding of where the rhyme and reason comes from this and where we're trying to really be consistent. I think staff did a great job of putting their best foot forward in this. So I was very impressed with the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, all good points.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions? Yep.
Make just one more comment, and it's about the recommendations. And the decoupling, to me, was something that I hadn't considered, but having hear from other people who've done it on a regular basis, how much time and cost it saves to be able to start moving forward. And if they don't get the rest of it together before building permit, that's on them. And but at least they had the opportunity to do that, so I like that.
I think the other point was that sometimes there are some changes that happen, again, between the person who designs it, who is just maybe not out in the field, and who has to guarantee the plantings for a year, versus the installer. And then when they do something different, we say, well, time out. I'm sorry. That went through the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council approved it. Time out. What are you doing? We don't like to have to say that, but that's what ends up happening because you're supposed to follow the plan that got approved.
No, I'll say save cost for rewrites and stuff.
Yep.
Architectural time.
And time and just hassle. Our time too, having to take it back through if that were to happen.
And I'll just say too, I think a lot of the improvements that were made seem small, but just the communication piece and being able to sit down in the room together, I think helped a lot. So just appreciate the developers coming to the table. I know we've got a few here. Staff being able to sit down, kind of work through everything. Council members taking your time to help work through the process. But just having that chance to really sit down and work through some of those conversations, that we might hear offline, but we never get a chance to just sit down and work through. But again, credit to staff for making a lot of those changes kind of as we were in the process. And even just small things, communication on, when notifications get sent out, how do we make sure people know that they can have multiple people receive those notifications? And
That's true. Yeah, that was a change as well. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it really was an incredible process. So I do thank everybody involved, the developers that were there, staff. And I think everything that you said tonight highlights how receptive the city was to ideas that made sense. And either they were quick changes or you're presenting them to us tonight. And, but also, we had to revisit what's the rationale for not changing? Why did we keep it that way? And so it was informative. I think at least the three of us that were there, that we learned a lot in that regard. And so I echo the sentiments of everybody here that I was very appreciative of the process, and we should keep that model in mind. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more, Mr. Mayor. Stephanie, we had talked about when you kind of presented your initial report to the voting members about maybe bringing the group back together, or maybe sending out a report back to those that were in attendance in maybe a year to kind of talk about, hey, so again, this is what we are potentially going to receive and file here in 2 weeks. Where are we at in terms of our progress on this? What were our opportunities? What were our wins? Do we still have a plan to do that?
In a year, right? I think that was
Correct.
brought up. Yeah. Yes, I believe I added that to the report. I'll double check, but I guess the question would be, what do we think is a year? Is it a year from like May, or is it a year from January? But yes, absolutely we can do that. And I'll just reach out to those who participated in the process.
Yeah,
and we can
I think
go
that
from
would
there.
be great. I think, again, just we all have warm, fuzzy feelings about it right now. Let's make sure that we did what we said we were going to do, and everyone feels as though this was meaningful. I think that's great.
Yep.
Thank you.
thank you, Counselor. Anything else before since we are going to vote, we'll open up to public comment as well, but anything else before we go to public comment? All right, and otherwise, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak this evening? Just name and address, please.
Name and address. Mark Kittrell, 1605 West 12th Street, and Eagleview, a developer. So thank you very much for those of you who aren't developers for taking time to sort of walk in the shoes of developers for a while. We obviously don't walk in the shoes of council people and city staff all the time, so I think it was a really great opportunity. I wanted to thank everybody, particularly the council people that were very involved in this. It was a very well done. Thank you for the chairperson who worked specifically very hard, who came through loud and clear. I think the other thing that I really wanted to do was make sure this did get moved around a little bit, and I did talk to Stephanie about it, and the report is very well put together. I've spoken with several of the developers. Nice to have one of the developers on the other side of the desk that's kind of helping us out on this as well. So it's nice to see the report come through, and I think the way I would characterize it is I think we all learned a lot. And I would say that you all learned a lot about us, and we all learned a lot about you. And I'm very much going to follow up on Councilperson Lauda's comments and say, I think really this just does need to be done regularly. If there's anything that sort of, I would say, came out of this, it was a good chance to understand. I mean, developers see a list of check marks of about 27 things long, and we're like, oh my Lord, do we have to do all that stuff? Now, honestly, we probably need to do all of that stuff, and we probably really, are doing all of those things, but I don't know that we think about it in exactly those ways, so it's nice to sort of see the way that you all think about it, and we can come together. An overriding theme that I think I really want to make sure, and I think it doesn't come to a surprise to anybody, budgets are challenged these days. Economics are really difficult these days, and construction is incredibly difficult these days. So when we talk about doing this once every year, once every couple of years, it wouldn't be sort of exaggerating to say it'll be a different world probably in a year. I mean, I think we're all kind of hanging on trying to see what's going to happen in a year, and all of our budgets are sort of there. So I think really the important thing is to understand we're all in this together. You need your budgets to grow. We obviously need to make a living. We all are working to try and find the way for new people to find their way into our community. We very much need that. I think this is kind of central to that. It's hard to grow an economy without people, and it's hard to have people without an economy. Those are kind of the real challenges that are there. My only thing that I wanted to just sort of highlight, if I can, is the infill. I know you're working on an infill plan. I think that's a particularly important thing. We'll be looking for that. We've talked about parking. I promise I'm not going to talk about parking tonight, but I got to at least put a little plug in there on the bottom of it. And I just do want to ask the question, because this is where it's out of my pay grade. The difference between receive and file and approve doesn't mean anything, or does mean anything. Is it, sorry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, don't open that can of worms.
Aaron, you want to talk about pieces of fruitcake?
I will say it means we're accepting the recommendations in the plan.
Okay.
And we'll be moving ahead with them. Obviously, all of them will have to come back to council, like the zoning text amendments. When we do the zoning rewrite, we'll have to come back for approval.
Yep.
But essentially, we're receiving filing that so staff can work off of that. But knowing a lot of those things will have to come back for eventual council approval.
My only point is a lot of work went into this. A lot of your work went on into this. A lot of all of our work went into this. Let's make sure that we use that work and move forward together. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchell. Name and address, please.
Good evening, Bob Manning, 2908 West 3rd Street, Cedar Falls. I'd like to start out by using the E word. Excellent, excellent. This is really one of the things that we've heard from builders and developers in the past, is that every other city that I work with seems that they're more anxious to help us. And we don't get that feeling at Cedar Falls. But I think this will go a long ways towards having a track to run on, and people can follow and feel better about the system. There's times built in for inspections. There's times built in for to look into some of the details, and that sounds great. On the project, and Stephanie's been very helpful when I've called and asked her questions. I did have one clarification, and maybe this was a double negative, but when we don't recommend the 3-year maintenance bond necessary, is it that we're not recommending a change, or we're still having the 3 year? Is it all right to address her, Mayor?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Correct. No changes proposed. It remains as a 3-year bond.
Okay, well, don't go away.
You're making Bob uncomfortable.
That's a new one.
I must be red. When the staff review in banking, we had serious, long checklists of things, and many businesses do that. I imagine that's very true in the health business. But to have a checklist of yes or no, you need this or you don't need this, and it was addressed at one point in here, but to have a formal checklist, I mean, again, just coming from the banking perspective, if there was amortization that the customer had, or if he had or she had depreciation that was treated different ways to qualify them for a loan. And so I'd like to make sure that, that the next step, or I'd like to suggest the next step, is having those detailed spec sheets that you can go down and check and say, yes. One complaint that we've heard, and this is a very positive meeting, so I don't want to dwell on the complaints, but one of the complaints that we've heard is that, gosh, every time I go back, there's another couple things that we need to do. And I think this is the start of all of that in here is going to be very much solve that type of problem. And I'd like to just suggest that checklists are included in your conclusion to this, and may need to be modified a year from now, certainly, as the world changes, whatnot. So you're still in my space. You know,
Well, you told her to stick around.
I know, he invited me.
The last thing, some people call it professional development, but I've read about cities and officials in the cities that have taken, again, we'll say professional development, but it's really sales training. It's an opportunity to say, hey, I want to help you. You're my customer or potential customer. And there's a lot of competition out there. Whether in banking, there's 23 financial institutions in our metro area. And some people would say we're overbanked. We have too many. And, but a city is competing also for that business. The business of having a new house or infrastructure put in or whatever the case may be. And the professional development can help people see that, feel it, touch it, and absorb it and come back and put that in their job. Now, not like we're going to be, you know, well, what do you want in your car? Do you want leather or do you want vinyl? Or it's not going to be used car salesman. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But it would just true professional development is what we would refer to it as. And so consider that. To Google that, you get a number of things that pop up that say, hey, that works with cities on a professional development type of an idea. So I'd like to throw that out for future discussion and consideration. So that's all I had. Can I sit down now?
You made me stay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Manning. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment for this evening? You're good. You can be excused, Stephanie. You're welcome to sit down. Any other public comment for this evening? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Any additional discussion, conversation? And then otherwise, I'll look for a motion to move forward with receiving and filing the recommendations as done in the report for staff to start working.
So moved.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. That wraps up our committee of the whole meeting, so I will call this meeting adjourned, and we will be back here at 7 o'clock for the regular scheduled city council meetings. Thank you, everyone.